chair forward.
Okay, wait. Speak into the mic.
There's lighting people in the audience.
Hello? Oh, God.
Yeah? Better now?
Oh, we're so back.
Okay, cool.
Daniel, what do you think slop is?
Right. So, like I said, we were talking about this the other day in our little intro call, and I think we have a kind of a similar way of looking at it, and I think it's important to distinguish between slop as a system and slop as the precipitate of that system. So I think slop is a system of, I'd say, interlocking incentive structures and other types of mechanisms that form the attention economy and result in a piece of content kind of being put in front of you through no deliberate act of anybody, but through just this sort of interlocking system. And maybe it has low quality, maybe you're not that interested in it, but it serves a purpose towards the system. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I think we're both agreed that it's reductive to just call AI slop, or just focus on a single brain rot video and call that slop. When we focus on just the product, the precipitate, we are losing sight of this greater kind of system that's bringing it into place. It's like focusing on the symptoms of a disease rather than the cause of it. And I like to point people back to the origin of the word. I mean, there was the sense of feeding pigs food, so there's always that kind of idea of a diluted substance. In the etymology we were looking at, slop literally meant dung in Old English. So there's this sort of like you're feeding pigs shit is literally the implication, right? But the modern popularization of the word comes from 4chan 2015 on the CK board. Unfortunately, referring to goy slop, the conspiracy theory that Jews are feeding people degraded food through McDonald's and stuff. And that is where the slop suffix was then bracketed off of that term and attached to other things, like in gaming you can have roll slop or friend slop, and in social media you could have AI slop. And as unfortunate as that origin is, there is something to the dynamic of goy slop that extends to how we talk about AI slop today, where there is some malicious actor knowingly degrading a substance for an unassuming mass audience. It's meant for the masses, the pigs, and it's some shittier quality. You could feed the pigs like Michelin grade food, but why would you do that? They're pigs, they don't deserve it. It's meant to be instrumental to achieve a function. It is merely meant to feed the pigs, not feed the pigs good food, And so in that sense, slop is an attitude of instrumentality. But there's also this observer that is required to be aware of the system of slop. And so in conspiracy circles, that was like the knowing person who was aware of the mass Jewish conspiracy. And in the modern extended sense of AI slop, it is now the media critic who is able to look back, be able to judge a situation and identify this is slop. The idea is that the masses are not aware that they are consuming slop. They're looking at these brain rot videos, and I think slop is tied to brain rot in that sense, that it's bad for your brain, if not, like food that's bad for your digestive system or whatever. So there's a lot of elements to that. I think slop is the people that are producing it. I think slop is the people that are consuming it. I think slop is the medium through which the content is brought, and all of these things constitute a greater ecology of how we consume low quality content. And sorry for yapping, I think it also is something that has historically always been a thing, and that's why I have that aversion to just calling AI slop, right? Hallmark movies were slop. It's something meant to achieve.
Well, this is what, the term before slop was schlock. I think that we had, I don't know if everyone is familiar with that. You weren't, which I thought was kind of interesting, but schlock was, interestingly enough, with the goy slop thing, a Yiddish term that actually meant like junk, literally. But it described the same type of content that was like with a commercially minded content that was low quality. And obviously, as long as there's been an incentive to create this stuff, there's been this stuff ever since the printing press. There's been penny dreadfuls, there's been schlock or slop or whatever. I do think it's interesting that schlock is trash and slop does imply a little bit of sustenance. And I think with my personal definition of the difference between schlock and slop is, one, slop is defined by the feed. You don't have a slop without the feed, literally, but also without algorithms.
Food feed, social media feed.
Yes.
There's that metaphor of consuming media.
Right, and there's automation. Schlock, maybe there was still an interlocking system of incentives that created something, but it wasn't actually automated. And I think that slop only works with both. Yeah, there's next token prediction, this type of thing. There's also the prediction, or the suggestion algorithms. And without those kind of interlocking systems, there's no slop is the automation of schlock.
Definitionally something that is brought to you. It can't be slop if it merely exists, it needs to be fed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, I agree that penny dreadfuls and Hallmark movies and, controversially, dare I say, Love Island are all slop. And these existed before AI, and to me, it's something that is made for the incentives rather than with a sense of human meaning, quality, curation, intentionality. It is instrumentality over intentionality. Hallmark movies are made because they need to churn out movies, and Love Island is made because they need something to put on the TV channel because their job is to fill up space on TV. So slop fills up space. It literally fills the container content. I guess it fills something up at the expense of our subjective evaluations of it being good. And I think slop will always be subjective. One man's slop is another man's treasure. There's something you can look at and find value in. And one of my personal goals in life is to find deep meaning and value in anything I look at, including AI slop. But I also recognize that for most people, and including my average experience in social media, I find some content to be higher quality than other content.
Sure, but I think the experience of finding other people's tastes kind of incomprehensible or slop, that's just going to be exaggerated by the system. It's personalized. It's going to become even more personalized. There was, I think, a pretty interesting paper that came out today where they used a digital twin of a brain and they showed some types of videos that were most optimized for stimulating a certain region of the brain. And obviously that's about a general brain model, but those will exist for individual brain models too. So that's where we're heading, and it will become, I think, obviously I can see why there's criticism there, but at the same time, from a personal subjective experience, this content will be incredibly meaningful, incredibly personally meaningful in a way like your dreams are. And you don't, telling somebody else your dream is not engaging in conversation for the same reason. So I think that's kind of where we're unfortunately heading towards in culture in a lot of ways.
I do feel like the average person experiences a greater disconnect today from what they're consuming and what they would like to be consuming versus in the past. I think this is tied to the proliferation of metrics and incentives, and they have created sort of a game on social media where you can just win the game by optimizing for the metrics, which are not necessarily aligned with how we resonate with something implicitly. There's a lot of studies showing that we tend to click more on high arousal content that triggers our sense of fight or flight, that feelings of contentment don't spread as virally, or we know that stuff that generates comments, stuff that generates shares is not neutral. There's a certain type of thing that makes you more willing to click a button. I like to tell people that the like button is not how much you like a video, it's how willing you are to click a button. And so this is now something that can be gamed. This is something that you can manipulate. Where previous forms of media, they had incentives that shaped them, but not to the degree where now distribution itself, virality itself, is contingent on metrics. And I think the average person, perhaps it's out of just a postmodern sensibility, but feels a greater awareness of the slop that they're consuming and a greater sort of this overwhelming negativity toward the media ecosystem we exist in.
Yeah, I think there's probably a pretty big gap between the revealed and stated preferences of people here. And so I don't know if I really buy that people are more unhappy with their media consumption today than they were in the past. I think they might remember it that way, but at the same time, media access is more or less unlimited. Historically, you have access to all sorts of libraries of content that I didn't when I was a kid, for instance. So I don't know, I still like that. And yes, I see a lot of content that I don't like, but I personally, I wouldn't say that I am upset with, maybe upset with some of like the media that's being generated now, but in terms of the internet as a place for finding content that's meaningful for me, that's easier than ever, I find. I don't know. Do you find that differently?
Is this part of how you define Sloptimism?
Well, actually, no, not necessarily. Although I do, yeah, I'm a Sloptimist. We should get into that. I think of that term as being, let's see. So I define it as the Panglossian embrace of the total output of the attention economy. And the Panglossian, that implies a sort of, this is, from Voltaire. This is a character who was overly optimistic no matter how many hardships he faced, because he had a belief that God is good and this was the greatest of all possible worlds, and therefore everything was happening for the purpose. And so I'm just sort of advocating for that as an attitude that you can have towards slop, where you can acknowledge that you're going to have a lot of bad externalities, but also you're going to have things like Italo brain rot that we both agree are extremely meaningful and communally enjoyed. And I think also for slop itself, the precipitate to improve, for AI content to improve, unfortunately it's being produced because of the system of slop. That's the economy that supports the acceleration of that technology. So the only way out is through. That's how I see it. And like we could hope for AI content that is completely separate from Meta's incentives or whatever, but that's just not how it's actually been developed. That's just not how the technology came to be. And so, yeah, I'm just for kind of digging through the dirt and finding the accidental gems. And I also think even if slop or AI content sometimes is devoid of intent, there's plenty of accidental beauty. There's plenty of artists who have explored chance and the lack of like artistic intent. This is a Duchampian idea. This isn't like a novel idea. So I think there's plenty of that, and there's lots of like weird junk that I see on Facebook or whatever that is maybe it's camp or something. Maybe that's another way to think of it. But there's really great camp being generated in this ecosystem.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up camp. I feel like to look at slop is sort of, in that Sontag sense, to be able to see the artifice of an object, to see how it performs, and then critique its performance and not what it is in itself. So there's a level of pulling back and examining. I think in how I examine slop, and I think how most people see it, it is this deeply negative thing that is misaligned with how we experience meaning and value, and I think that's because of how our metrics are misaligned with how we actually experience that meaning. I see social media as, unfortunately, kind of like a game you can play and win. Like I mentioned, a game is something that relies on fictional rules, like the bishop moves diagonally, and now you can play by these rules to win the game. And social media does not operate with how people actually resonate with a piece of media. It operates on something that is predictable, that can be measured, that is reliant on this arbitrary system that was set up. I think virality is not something that is innate or can be really measured, but will always depend on the affordances of a particular medium. So I'd like to...
I don't know about arbitrary. I feel like that's just too strong of a term. I mean, they're clearly, it works. Like, these are profitable businesses, and these are metrics that, support its profitability. So it's not
look
arbitrary.
At slop bowls as an example, right?
Yeah.
Slop bowls are created when businesses are trying to make money by generating low-quality bowls that the mass...
Are they low quality? I feel like slop bowls are actually defined by higher quality ingredients that are just not... There's like lower labor input in them, and that's the general... Like if you look at like most of the bowl slop companies, whatever, Kava, if you look at the actual ingredients, my guess is they're much higher quality than the average fast food. So I think
the average fast food is also slop under this definition. The opposite of slop is something that is curated with a deep intention, kindness, care, and love for the product itself, for its own end, and not for some instrumental end. I think slop is this sort of ethos of resigned instrumentality where we simply use things to create things for the metrics rather than for some deeper human value, for some significance that exists beyond slop. I think slop happens when we give ourselves up to the metrics. I think accelerationism is the ultimate form of giving yourself up to the metrics. It's resigning yourself to playing the game that we don't necessarily have to play.
Yeah, well, so I mean, we talked about this on our call as well, and I do think of Sloptimism as a form of cope, and maybe accelerationism as a form of cope too. But that's because I don't think that I don't know where the limit of this is a game and these rules are arbitrary. I don't know where you can actually draw those lines. Every part of life follows those same competitive dynamics at some level. And of course, there are plenty of situations where altruism and cooperation are the optimum strategy, but there's no part of life that is, that we can just separate off from that eternal competition for basically thermodynamic efficiency. And ultimately, accelerationism is just a product of those dynamics that I think are deeply real and physical and cannot be escaped. And so, yes, there is some degree of flavor that we can choose, and there's some hyperstitioning, I guess, somewhat. But there's a reason why this version of the hyperstition feature turned out. It's not just because more people believed it. It's because it is derived from like a thermodynamic truth.
I think a well-lived life is one where you choose which games to play and to which extent. I like playing chess. I like to accept the rule sometimes that the bishop moves diagonally. But then I choose to stop playing chess sometimes. And a chess accelerationist, I guess, would only want to play chess forever, over and over again. Capitalism is another example of a game here, right? I could devote my life to making as much money as possible, but will that make me feel fulfilled, happy, like my life is worth something? That's a subjective thing ultimately arising for myself. And I suppose I could change the way I look at the metrics, but more easily you can change the metrics or choose not to participate all the time. So I'll make money when I have to survive, but beyond that, I want to do other things that bring me deep value, like prioritizing other people in my life and not throwing them under the bus for the sake of making money. So capitalism is a game where you can choose to step in and out. I think social media is a similar game. We should choose to step in occasionally. We should do it with deliberation and intentionality. I think the best ways to fight slop, if slop is this kind of instrumental use of something, is to, one, change how it's produced, so not make things instrumentally, but make things intentionally. Two, change how you look at slop, because it is a subjective thing, so you can change the way that you perceive something, absolutely. Three, you can change the way the metrics work, so the way it's brought to you. And along all these different steps, we should be careful and intentional the whole time.
Okay, there's a lot there to counter. Let me see if I can do it all. One, we'll just start with the changing the mode of production. I think we already talked about this a little bit, but who is going to be paying for these new AI models if it's not, basically a flywheel from them being posted on social media and ad spend, etc. Like, how do you suggest that we just change the mode of production for AI media or for the training of these models?
Perhaps we shouldn't. Also, engagement optimization algorithms are a huge problem. I think if something does not bring people value and joy, and again, this is not something value that is measured in money, but something that is...
How do you measure value?
It will always be subjective. It will always be. And that is why I do think there is an individual duty to act with a deep intentionality, but also a collective duty to come up with what is our framework for how we experience value. And again, this is a fight you have to sort of choose how you play it,
right.
But I don't believe that we should just focus on the individual in these circumstances. That's like saying carbon emissions are a problem, so watch your fossil footprint. No, of course it's the oil companies, right? But
I disagree. I don't think it's the oil companies.
There's a lot going on. I don't want to be reductive in any.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're gonna get into the side about debating capitalism, not slop, but maybe that's the point actually. I don't think that fossil fuels are the fault of the oil companies. Again, revealed versus stated preferences. We might all complain about fossil fuels, yet look around us. Like, I don't know. They fuel our society. They provide all sorts of good, unequivocal good in our life, and we have no alternative. And similarly, I feel like you're like, money isn't everything. And I agree, it's not a perfect measure of what it's trying to measure, sort of like IQ is not a perfect measurement of G, even if G does exist, if there is some sort of general intelligence. Maybe we don't have a perfect measure, but you're suggesting, this isn't our perfect measure, so instead let's throw it out, and let's just come up with a new framework here, but that's of course going to be subjective and result, and whatever metrics you choose, I think are ultimately going to be every bit as subjective as money, but even more subjective, because ultimately money is, again, it's a way of accounting for something that has thermodynamic truth. It's about energy, labor input, and yes, is it an imperfect system? No, but optimizing for more money is a much better system than optimizing for nothing, which is what you're suggesting for.
I don't think we should throw everything out the window. I think, again, it's really picking and choosing how we play our games, how we structure our games. If the game is not fun, we can change the rules. And yes, it's very hard to change the rules of something like capitalism, but that's why things like interest rates.
Biology a game?
Biology is not like
Is Darwinian evolution a game, or is it a thing that just happens and it's a constant competition that we don't have any choice over?
I think this is a different framing than things that are more in our control, right? A social structure is in our control, and a biological one, although we can talk about the structure of Darwinian evolution. I think maybe if we look at the oil companies, for example, they are producing oil because the metrics tell them it's good to do oil, and you are using oil as an unassuming consumer. But the slop media critic would take a step back and be like, well, I can choose.
Oil because the energy density of petroleum is unmatched by any other substance, and we wouldn't have modernity without it. Unfortunately, that is what we needed to do. And even if we're transitioning to nuclear and solar and everything else now, we need to amortize all that development with fossil fuels.
We can change incentive structures to prioritize different resources. We can change how we personally consume things. So oil accelerationist would drive everywhere, whereas I like walking. It's really pleasant for me.
Look at Texas. Texas does not have any type of regulation against oil. It has more solar development than anywhere else, much more solar development than California, more wind development. It has nuclear reactors being built there. And that's because the market demands more energy. And if energy can become made cheaper, it will, wherever it is, it will go to solar. It didn't happen from subsidies. It happened despite the subsidies.
And I agree that the metrics tell us there appears to be a demand for slop on social media. But the metrics, I think, once they become a target, cease to be good metrics.
I agree.
And if you ask the average person, hey, would you rather not live in a car-optimized society, I think the average person would say that they feel better living in a walkable city without being reliant on cars. But we're currently in a system that disincentivizes that. And so we can do and fight every step of the way to create walkable cities, to create less oil reliance, instead of just giving up in this Panglossian framework where you accept oil as, well, it's here, it's only going to rely on it more, which isn't, of course, not true, right?
No, I'm not saying we're going to rely on it more.
Perhaps I don't mean to straw man you with oil accelerationism, which I think is...
I'm saying we're going to transition away from it without any type of top-down command to transition away from it. And the attempt to do that in Europe, I think Europe is a perfect case example. They did a very deliberate attempt. We're going to stop using, nuclear first, which was a very disastrous thing, but we're going to lower our use of emissions and just support all that externalities. That requires an international cooperation that just doesn't exist right now. And in the end, they ultimately just sacrifice their entire industrial economy and their ability to support a lot of policies, which I'm sure you're in favor of.
The reason cooperation often fails to exist is because incentives are structured against it. You play out the game theory, you say, oh, the logic dictates we do X, Y, and Z. I really have been thinking a lot about Pascal recently, the mathematician of Pascal's, wager in scientific unit fame, and most brilliant scientist of his time in the scientific revolution. And at the end of his life, he spends his time advocating for why we should return to Christianity. And I'm not religious myself, but I think it's worth looking into, the arguments he was making here. And he distinguishes between the mathematical mind that is very good at grappling with principles and axioms and arriving at a logical conclusion. And then there's the intuitive mind, which is very good at seeing the world as it is and as you like it and as you want it to be, and for what it is fully. The mathematician's problem is that they cannot grasp principles and axioms that they have not accounted for, and the intuitive mind's problem is that they cannot reason from what they have. And so the best way forward is to unite kind of this mathematical and intuitive mind. And I suppose I'm advocating for a pragmatic approach where you recognize what is. We have a certain reliance on oil, we have a certain social media ecosystem in place, but now you can question, what principles am I not thinking of? What could be changed here? How can I change the way I interact? How can I advocate for the system to be changed in ways where we do not resign ourselves to the principles and axioms we have already laid out for ourselves, but we think and discover and create new principles and axioms, which is very possible in this sort of slop framework.
What are the mechanisms that you're just, you talk about advocacy at every step. What does that look like to you?
I've spent a lot of time interviewing slop creators. Right after Trump got elected, Meta changed all their incentives, and suddenly there was these super racist videos with 30 million views on Instagram Reels of shirtless black men running after fried chicken. And so like I reached out to the person who made this video I'm describing, and he's a 22-year-old in Lithuania. And I asked him, why are you making this video? And he said, well, it's gonna get me views and followers. And I genuinely don't think this guy was racist. He's never even seen a black person before. The problem is, this is sort of a banality of the evil situation, where all the structures are telling Adolf Eichmann to gas Jews in concentration camps, and he does it for a career promotion, which is the most mundane thing ever. And all the incentives are telling this 22-year-old Lithuanian creator to make racist slop videos, and he's doing it because of the metrics, and not because of some deep reason of the human soul, of this arbitrary thing you can't quite pin down, which you can't measure, and so you ignore it. And I don't want to accept these metrics that are telling me to make racist slop videos because they're good at getting views and followers, which they were for this guy, you know? I would rather choose with a deep intentionality first that we know like Meta changed incentives there. We know that these platforms are constantly tweaking their algorithms.
Have you not changed the style of your content to get more followers? I mean, you have a million followers.
100%.
How did you get
100%. And this is
followers?
why, you know, if I truly believed it weren't possible to advocate with intentionality, I would not be on social media. I think the problem of slop, you know, and I do think the question is never what is slop, but how is slop produced, and there's several checkpoints along the way, and it is this sort of way everybody has of giving up to the metrics. One, you as the creator give up to the metrics and just do what the metrics tell you. Two, the user gives up to the metrics saying, oh, you know, the algorithm says this is what I want to look at, so this is what I want to look at. Three, we as a collective agree that these metrics work and are good. So I don't agree with any of that. First, I think we should say everything like it deeply matters. Like this is a battle for the human soul, and that's what I think the prerogative to fight slop comes from. That this is no less than a spiritual battle against this
But you said
sort
you're
of.
not religious. So what is a human soul?
It's something up to you to define.
Yeah, well, I don't believe in one. I'm not religious.
That's
either,
completely
so
all right.
That's
Completely
why
all right.
I find it hard for me to defend the sanctity of this thing that I don't believe in.
Of course. I believe in arbitrary construction of meaning.
Yeah.
I believe I gave a bunch of people brainwash stickers earlier. I arbitrarily imbued meaning into that. That was my Eucharist that I gave to you. And we can treat things with this deep reverence and intentionality, and we can do that by being deeply aware of everything and trying to learn more and knowing what we're saying and being deliberate with how we're saying it. And we can also be more aware as viewers, of course, to consume everything with a deep intentionality, not just give yourself up to the way you're consuming. Then you slop by allowing yourself to consume slop. I slop when I make something that would just get views and followers. And we all collectively slop when we play into engagement optimization algorithms, when there could 100% be better algorithms that are more aligned to how we have content.
Yeah, the algorithms are always changing, for sure. They get better and worse. It feels like the weather.
But a Sloptimist would say that the algorithm is the end. You know,
no, there's lots of different incentives. I mean, but what I would say is ultimately, and this gets back to just accelerationism in general, is you keep on saying there could be better incentives, there could be better games, but we're kind of, this is basically meditations on Moloch. We are stuck in this.
Yeah.
Well, we are stuck in that at the highest level. It would require basically, everything from China and the US up down to every interpersonal. Like, the incentives for AI to continue accelerating in the way that you don't like, and to colonize the economy in every way, and to automate everything and optimize for everything, are extremely great and multifaceted. There's interpersonal competition at your job, or just maybe not even at your job. There's interfirm competition. There is then, again, this great power competition that's fueling all of this. I don't see the world where there's any type of coordinated, deliberate effort to change our incentive structure.
Yeah.
I don't see how that's going to happen.
I think it's very interesting you mentioned Moloch, the Scott Alexander essay. I think it's excellent. I think people should read it. That comes from the Allen Ginsberg poem Howl, where Moloch is decried as capitalism, and we all have to participate in this, and we all kind of are made worse for it, and that traces back to the Mesopotamian demon that eats babies, that if you worship it you get some benefits out of it, but you kind of have to worship it, but you kind of give it. We could choose not to worship this demon. We could choose to summon another demon.
No, you can't.
In his poem Howl, Ginsberg has after the third part, there's a conclusion, and it's holy, holy, treat everything as holy. And I think people should read this poem. It's deeply meaningful to me, and I want other people to experience a deep meaning in their own lives. And I think by treating everything as holy, regardless of whether I'm not religious, but I think we should treat everything as holy regardless, ourselves and believe in others' capacity to treat things as holy. And that is the way we fight Moloch. That is what he recommends in his poem. And there's really no other way forward than to do that. And I find it would just not be a life worth living if you accept worshiping Moloch.
Right, but there's going to be people who defect and do worship Moloch, and then you're just back in the exact same place, and that's where we're at. So I hear what you're saying, but how?
We try to
you say more positive things.
Change the reasons for why you would worship Moloch in the first place. We try to make it possible. There's no other reason to live than to try.
Capitalism is winning as a system because it is more optimized. It has won. It has defeated the other competing systems. It is more optimum, and those other ones don't survive. I don't see how you can just willfully say that that's not the case. This is what my point is. Competition is at every level, and it's real, and it's rooted in thermodynamics. There's scarcity. Of course, there is an abundance of things, but there is scarcity, and there is material at this basis, and that is what's driving all of this. I don't think it's a matter of choice.
I think capitalism is one tiny sliver of reality that we participate in. Within that, the content economy as it exists on social media is another tinier sliver of reality. If you pull out of these kind of frames, if you go and add more principles and axioms that you weren't accounting for, the true nature of reality is this far deeper, far greater thing that you could choose to look at and accept. And yes, you sort of have to play chess every now and then, and it's if pawn e4 wins slightly more than knight f6 or whatever, it shouldn't be like we should never play knight f6. It's simply fun to play knight f6 sometimes. And you can choose to play this sliver of reality, the capitalism and the social media part of it.
Can
and
you
then
choose to have your metabolism pause? Or
again, I don't think equating a sociocultural system with
not a sociocultural. That's my whole point.
I do not think there's something innate. I think capitalism is a collectively upheld illusion that we're all sort of pretending that this is a normal thing. There is nothing objectively in the universe that makes this real.
I think capital is a lossy approximation for stored labor and or energy or whatever you want to account for it. You could definitely call for some type of non-binary money, a more multipolar, whatever, like a quadratic money that basically accounts for all these externalities in its own unit. But we don't have that. That's gonna be very hard to do. And if you did try to do a system like that, you go back to the subjectivity. So this is the
please, bro, just one more parameter, and I'll represent the entire universe.
Well, right.
It feels like there's this great Jorge Luis Borges story. I highly recommend it, people. The Library of Babel. If you haven't read it, there's an infinite universe of hexagonal rooms, and once you've represented all of reality, once you've done all that, it's all completely meaningless. And I think that sort of quest of both AI and social media to completely represent all of reality will lead you to a room where you pull out a random book and it's complete gibberish, right? So how do we maintain the books that we have as holy and keep them the way they are? Slop is this sort of, I want to turn out as many books as possible simply because the metrics say that books are good. And now you have a book that means absolutely nothing. And instead we should have books that mean something, curate a library that has value to you, share your library with other people, and maybe don't build an infinite series of hexagonal rooms.
Maybe. Should we open it up for questions?
Yeah, please feel free to raise your hands. Over there.
Is instrumentality, soulless instrumentality, like you say, worse than negative intentionality? What if the kid in Lithuania is actually racist? The content he's producing, it's intentional, but it's not positive intentional. Is that better than soulless instrumentality? Is that world better than this one?
To me, they're about the same, right? It's either way, you are contributing to something really negative, and we should positively, intentionally contribute as much as we can. And the banality of evil is functionally evil, right?
So I guess my question is sort of on the discussion from earlier about whether we choose to play chess or not, because I think what sort of I took away from that was you're saying like, okay, well, every kind of system we exist in from the top down is sort of a choice. But I guess the question, I think what I took away from what Daniel was saying was sort of this idea that, well, in order to change the incentive structures that feed you like endless slop content designed to capture your attention to turn a profit, that would require essentially top-down government change of every country in the world. And so like, how do you, I guess, propose we change the rules of the game if we don't treat them like fundamental like inevitabilities?
One, this is an inevitability if we keep playing the game. So we should treat it as that, play the game of this is not a game, and make real change happen by advocating for governmental laws saying we should not have engagement optimization algorithms or something like that. Do you have thoughts on that?
I just think that you want to be on a social media that has no engagement algorithms, so that would be like much worse. Like that would be obviously worse. You would have even lower ability to tune content that you're interested to.
Engagement to me is a deeply flattened metric of attention which fails to really capture how we do pay attention. Attention is this sort of...
But I just mentioned the like brain scans that are talking about like highlighting very specific sectors of the brain. How is that an imprecise measurement of attention?
I agree, when a certain environment with certain affordances is created, it means that you will pay attention to a certain type of content. I do not agree that that environment should be created. And if you structure something differently, when I walk around an art museum, there's not audio-visual things screaming out at me. I can choose what painting to look at. My attention is different. There's types of attention, for example, top-down versus bottom-up attention. Your brain scans are measuring bottom-up attention, where our attention is involuntarily drawn to a stimulus. Top-down attention is a concerted, focused attempt to lock into a stimulus. These algorithms do not distinguish between sustained and selective attention, where selective attention is you tracking a stimulus just like as it appears, and sustained attention is this deep focus on a single thing to the point of exertion, right?
You don't think that can measure?
I think there's parts of attention that can, the outward responses of attention, like your willingness to click a button, are actually biased toward.
The things that you're saying that it's not tracking. You're basically just saying they should have
top-down attention. Definitionally, I think is against engagement optimization algorithms. That like your conscious selection.
Maybe not as we know them, but you could predict what thing this person is going to be doing intense focus on next.
I'm very worried about the predictive society we're sort of careening toward, where we assume that we have all the details, but it's more like the Minority Report, where you're missing some details and you say this is going to happen, and then you do hyperstition it into existence, but we can choose not to accept that sort of game we're playing.
Yeah, you have questions?
Yeah, you stated kind of the thesis around the thermodynamics and their ties to capitalism. You kind of posited that this is a law across the board. Would you say that you don't think governmental intervention can have any impact on the way that that system operates?
Sure, of course it can. Yeah, no, I mean there are incentives that can be designed, and there are downstream effects of that. Of course, government is an ability to do that. At the same time, the government is limited in fighting the nature of thermodynamics and how physics works and how metabolic reality. That's just what I
So sorry, just to
Go
clarify,
ahead.
you don't believe that the reorganization of a society can impact the way it operates, or to the extent that it, I guess, really changes the trajectory?
Dan, repeat the question.
You want me to repeat the question? So you're saying, that you don't think that changing the rules of the society can change how it operates? Is that what your question is?
I'm just trying to clarify.
Yes.
Do you believe that reorganization of society to an extent can modify the trajectory, or do you think that we're kind of always going towards this ever finite point?
Right. Okay. Do you think the reorganization of society? Sorry, I'm doing such a bad job of. I'm sorry. I cannot repeat his question. I can answer it, but I can't repeat it. I think that we have looked at. Okay, if you look at command economy experiments, you run into a very similar thing that you're complaining about like imperfect measurements. I think that if you're trying to do something like that, that involves more of a deliberate, prescribed way of consuming resources or distributing them without sort of acknowledging that there is a lot of diffuse information that you can get from a market, yeah, you're going to have a lot of distortions in the system. I think that if there's any technology that will allow for that to potentially become more feasible, it's AI, of course. We all know that. And I think that in general, if there's any thing that exists now that could rupture all of the incentive structures enough to radically reorganize society, that's AI as well. And so part of my sloptimism, you can have a fully leftist, Marxist sloptimism, left accelerationism, that this is accelerating the internal contradictions and it's all about the collapse. And then finally, with our superhuman AI, we can do command economy. Maybe, but maybe not.
As I've said, I'm just very hesitant of treating the immutable laws of the universe like they are applicable to human construction of meaning, which is this arbitrary, individual, subjective process that we like to treat as objective. We like to say that this word has a clear definition, but really it's a bunch of people individually agreeing that we agree on this. And all of language, all of the social structures we have in place are deeply collectively upheld illusions, and we can challenge those illusions by first restructuring how we individually have meaning and create meaning, and whether we're relying on other people to create that meaning or whether we're doing it ourselves. Two, bringing our sense of meaning to other people as much as possible. And you can never really fully translate something because it is this deeply individual thing that arises from your subjective worldview. And then three, cultivating that different state that could exist. It is not immutable, that the word apple means apple. Like, I could wake up tomorrow and decide it's banana to me,
Okay, but are the laws of physics immutable? Are the laws of physics immutable, or?
I think these are different things entirely.
But how? I mean, are there immutable laws of physics at the base? Are you a materialist, or do you think that also the meaning?
I mean, if we get deeply
subjective
metaphysical,
meaning-
I'm super not sure about reality existing at all. But we don't have to go to I like to play in the level of we agree that this is real.
Sure. Right.
We could be Boltzmann brains, pea zombies. I don't know.
Right. Boltzmann brains. Right. But that being said, so we're gonna just table stakes. Yes, material reality is real. Laws of physics maybe are changing slowly as we learn more, but they are not immutable.
I've always visualized reality as a series of games you can play, and one, I believe I exist. I don't really believe that, but once I cross that step, I can be okay, my physical reality around me exists. And now that I can physically interact with my reality, these labels we apply to it are real. These are all various steps, and then one of those steps is capitalism, and then another step is the content economy. And you're so many degrees removed from the phenomena that just create your emergent sense of consciousness or whatever, however that works. I don't know if you want to describe it in any kind of coherent terms, because we don't have that language, we don't have a full understanding. I think we need to return to a deep, loving awareness that we do not know everything, and we should stop pretending that we know everything, because we are getting lost in our principles and axioms rather than recognizing the unknown aspects of the universe. And that's not to be against scientific research.
I think capitalism is the system that acknowledges that much more than any other one.
I'm very in favor of, for example, AI using AI to detect brain tumors. I think this is amazing. I'm so glad we're doing this. I think it's so fun to look at embedding.
What if to get to the brain tumor curing, you need the slop economy first? What if that's what's fueling the brain tumor cures?
I believe our resources can be allocated more efficiently.
But Meta is doing a very good job of both. That's how they work. They're literally reallocating the resources from slop to doing very important brain research, right? How is that a bad system? Because the government should be doing it instead?
Again, I'm in favor of this research being done. I think it should just be done very carefully with a deep kind of awareness of how humans create meaning. And that's all I'm saying. And I don't think we should do things callously and carelessly, because I think the sense of meaning matters to me more than people's lives. Lives only matter insofar as you feel like they matter. So for other people to be important, you first have to feel that sense of importance. Maybe that's a crazy take. I really, really think that this is something you can't quantify in a rationalist sort of sense where we maximize the amount of meaning people feel. This is this subjective thing which we really deeply have to feel for society to work on any level whatsoever. And the maxing mindset of just giving up to the metrics, that instrumental way of thinking, loses meaning entirely, which in our purpose here, if we have purpose, is to find out purpose.
Hey, no.
Sorry.
There's multiple hands.
Okay, yeah,
So
can you
that
get-
one,
please.
This person, there's like a series of people. I'm sorry.
But do you want to go people?
Yeah,
I can't see
so
back
you
here.
should go. Yeah. No, he was. No, I've been watching this whole time. Like,
Yeah, you know,
he's
please
moderate. For like 20 minutes.
I love
So, sorry.
Hi. I really liked, the point where you're talking about how the opposite of slop is things that are curated with deep kindness and intention, and that's like a detail. And I was thinking about it when you were talking about how social media, like there are people who play it like, just creating things for photos for friends and family, like just to create nice stuff. And then there are people who, like that Lithuanian guy who tried to get on that thing, who tried to like boost all the metrics to try and get to, the point, and they use it more as a vessel. I was thinking, in a way, that type of sort of like parallel, do you think there's a connection between, whether slop is in society and, how our society is like viewing things as like a zero-sum game? Sometimes like, when people try to create like movies, you have the Hallmark movies, which are like cheap, low budget, and then there's the ones that are like designed with intention. So, is it related to how much we're trying to get like a neutral ground?
I deeply believe that a society of slop is a society of means over ends, and that we should deeply treat everything in our lives like it has an end, like it is holy. That is what sacredness is to me. That is what meaning is to me. Treating something like it has an end in and of itself, and not that you're using it to achieve one particular end. And it's not to say that you can't ever use something. Just we should be incredibly deliberate when we do, and that's why when I don't think I have something to say, I don't post a video. I didn't post a video the last 3 days. I didn't have anything to say. I suppose I could, generate more shareholder value.
Shareholder value, this is the thing, like, people talk about shareholder value in this very dismissive term. It's a mean thing, but I think this is a common issue. Like, who owns the stock of public companies? Who made the most, obviously, who made the most in SpaceX? Elon. Who made a lot? Ontario Teachers Pension Union. Like, these are public companies. They're actually, like, the idea of a joint stock company and shareholder value is a deeply progressive and leftist idea compared to previous forms of capital, And I think it's important that we recognize that. I think if there's something that's sacred, the public joint stock corporation is a sacred institution.
I respect how you attribute meaning.
Should stop being so dismissive of it. Shareholder value is very important.
Yeah, so I have been a little confused. I love all the tangentials. I love it. But I want to make sure I understand the core of the debate, because in my mind it's kind of switched multiple times. And I would just like to hear it from you, because at first I thought, are we arguing whether AI generative content can be art, or are we arguing whether content that is optimized for social media can be good and can be art or holy? And then once you mentioned Moloch, then it started to make a bit more sense when you're arguing about incentives and whether you can actually leave the game or not. But I'm still unclear about the fundamental disagreement between you two with respect to slop and incentives. Am I being too clear?
No, I mean, I think we both agree that AI generated stuff can be art. I think that's kind of like table stakes for sure. I am arguing that yes, things that are precipitate of the feed, that is slop, like by any definition, can also have beauty and meaning, especially as can.
I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
And therefore, I think that there's those, even if there's no intentionality there, that's really not how I judge the content personally.
Do you believe there is a responsibility incumbent on the content creator to create intentionally or not?
No.
Okay, so this is maybe, we both believe that the user can perceive things and choose to perceive things in a meaningful way. in sort of a post-ironic sense, you know, where you just.
Yeah, like that over there.
That's great.
It's amazing.
I've been looking over it the whole time.
Yeah, distracting.
I think our difference here is whether we think that, there's this responsibility to avoid producing slop and to avoid the system that creates the slop.
And you're saying that you think that regardless of the rules, sometimes you can decide not to have to play by the rules.
I suppose I'm neither a slop optimist nor a slop pessimist. I'm a slop pragmatist. Like, it exists. The fact that it exists means we should now figure out what to do next. And I do believe in finding meaning in everything, including slop. And I try to live my own life this way. But I recognize that, one, I do see videos sometimes that I feel like I don't want to see this video. And two, a lot of people feel this shared sensation. And I would rather all of us be looking at something that we deeply value. And so my choice here as a slop pragmatist is to try to, in the ecosystem of slop, regardless of slop existing, treat everything like it has meaning, and at least try, because there's no point otherwise. I saw a hand all the way in the back. Let's go all the way in the back.
Was a hero, tried to pop the AI bubble. How did that go? Where is he now?
He's referring to this meme. Oh, it's over. Tung 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 sahur. We popped the AI bubble. Tung 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 sahur. No. I think it's actually really. I think brain rot is beautiful, and I think it is a way of people have like. So there's brain rot, like the idea of something that is mentally deleterious, and there's brain rot, like the meme aesthetic of nonsensical repetition, which creates arbitrary meaning onto the products of internet slop. Something like Italian brain rot, or like Skibidi Riz Ohio Gyat, or Matcha Lububu Dubai Chocolate is us taking the products of a slop ecology, turning them into something that has that arbitrary value to us anyway. Brain rot is part of that fight for the sacred, and I think it is turning this meaningless stuff into something that has meaning regardless. Charlie Kirk's face has a meaning to me, you know? And I think that's great. And Tung 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 Sahur has emerged as a sort of like folkloric, quasi-mythic symbol of a better internet. He's become the people's symbol of how we should treat AI. Yes, he is a product of AI, but he's sort of like this meta-awareness of it. When you engage with brain rot, it happens on a sensory level rather than the kind of meaning that can be quantified. There's the sort of meaning that exists in the semantic latent space, and then there's the sort of meaning that you feel when you're looking at J.D. Vance's face for the 1,000th time. That has some kind of sensory level that cannot be quantified.
What is sloptimism to you? It's slop optimism, but why are you a sloptimist? If you're not a sloptimist, why?
Yeah, I am a sloptimist, I think, although I have limits to my sloptimism. I'm definitely a slopologist, at least, is what I would say.
Can you define sloptimism?
So my definition is it's an attitude defined by the Panglossian embrace of the total output of the attention economy. That's my definition, if that counts. And part of that is we talked about curing cancer. I believe the system of slop is what is bringing AI into the world, for better or worse. And we could imagine an alternative incentive system to do that, but it's what's happening now. And the only way out is through. And I also, more specifically on the AI culture or AI art stuff, is new cultural forms are pretty much always downstream of technical innovation, whether it's the LP because there's microgrooves or film itself, etc. This is where new forms emerge. And generally when new forms emerge, they are derided by existing practitioners as slop. I mean, if you look at the earliest films, whatever.
Absolutely.
Not great
There's
films.
a great dialogue in the Phaedrus with Socrates and Phaedrus, where Socrates is freaking out about the written word and how it's slop, and how this representation of knowledge is not containing true knowledge because you can't interrogate the written word. Everybody should read this. It's really, really good. And he's basically calling the written word slop. And I kind of do agree. There's a lot of danger to the written word that we should accept before we even start to dabble with language at all. We should understand that we don't understand, again. and that we need to know things ourselves and embody. That's what meaning
This is
and
where we
knowledge.
disagree.
That's what
I think
Socrates
the
says, yeah.
existence, that the fact that LLMs work like they do shows that you do not need to have any type of specific, very, very careful understanding of language. The meaning is emergent and it comes from the combination, the network of all those words together
I
in their
agree.
relations.
Yeah, I
And
agree
the
that they're
fact that they
helping
work-
produce meaning now. I don't think that they are necessarily aligned with what language is. I mean, you look at words like delve that are overrepresented by AI. We know that it's not quite matched up to our human sense of language. Because you can't quite...
This is not an issue with AI in general. This is an issue with a very specific model and specific with the training sets. It's not like something you can talk to. I don't think you can claim that's a universal issue with AI. It might be an imperfect statistical representation of language.
You can never perfectly represent language because it's not a thing that objectively exists. It is something that is subjectively held within
Yet
all
they
of our
still
minds.
work. Yet LLMs still work, and they still express meaning, and they still can write code, and they can still do all these other things. So that shows, I think, that at its core, you do not need this deliberate, expressed understanding of words for them to have importance or for them to be real and have manifestations in the world. So I don't know.
And I'm also open to AI being conscious and able to contain knowledge. You know, like there's a lot of controversy over that. I'm not saying
Yeah, whether consciousness or not, put
whatever,
aside,
you know,
there's an
regardless-
intelligence that emerges from the words itself, which is, bring it back.
I do
At
not
beginning,
think
it's
the
very Jewish.
words
It's very Jewish.
contain
In the beginning,
meaning.
there was words.
I don't
right?
think the words contain, and I think
How
there's
God-
something.
how God
Yes,
created the universe,
I think if you
right?
look at early cultures, God said, "Let there be light," and then He named it light, and those are the first things God
But
did.
in the beginning, there
You
was the
look-
word.
Yeah.
That's before he named light. There was words.
So we agree
They're
that
real.
we agree that people ascribe meaning to words.
Yeah.
That Ta, also an ancient Egyptian kind of cosmogony, spoke the world into existence. And you look at ancient civilizations, you know, Chinese coming from oracle bone script used to predict the future, like Hebrew and Latin still being sacred languages of their respective religions, and the word spell being the same as in magic spell, like you spell a word and you cast a spell. The word grammar is related to the word grimoire, magician's manual. All this is to say that people have long felt a deep sense of magic over language. Now I feel like we are losing that magic with our rapid expansion of how we use language. There's this communication theorist, James Carey, who describes two models of communication, right? The first is information transferred, bits per second. And the second is a ritualistic mode of communication that doesn't necessarily, it cannot be quantified, but it exists on that Charlie Kirk, J.D. Vance level, where it is ritualistic, right? Small talk does not really have much semantic value, but it exists because we are bonding between each other as humans. I find small talk to be beautiful. I think it's very, very important. But it doesn't,
But there's good small talk and bad small talk, right?
Absolutely, and we should be intentional with how we do small talk.
But don't you think there could be a measure for that? I think it's measurable. There might not be one that exists, but why couldn't you measure that?
You choose how you want to talk and what you get out of it. You can't measure my sense of meaning I feel out of
You can
something.
predict if the small talk you're about to have with the other person is going to be good or not.
I think the prediction thing is sort of a teleological fallacy where we're putting like kind of this like axiom and we're saying it's going to go here. It's not necessarily going to go there. It's again this arbitrary with social structures like the system you've created.
Yeah. Questions?
Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah, you. Okay. So, Adam, you talk a lot about content making you feel things. This resonates with me on how I think a lot about embodiment and like how, like, I constantly feel like technology is like a thing that constantly makes me feel disembodied. A question I have for Daniel: what are your thoughts on being embodied and inhabiting a body?
Yeah, I mean, I have I guess a bit of an interesting relationship with that. So I got alopecia a few years ago. I used to have hair, and that was a real, unveiling of what it meant to be. It was like an overnight change in my sense of identity and having. And I think I admit that I tend to, maybe for that reason, partially, not value embodiment very much. That being said, I love to dance to music, love that stuff. But ultimately, no, I care more about words and ideas and thinking, and pretty much that's where I live.
Dancing's important. I think one thing with measurement, right, when you create a representation, the representation, you're presenting something again, right? That's sort of also a logical fallacy, that you're never quite making the exact same thing, you're just making an entirely new thing. I think a big fallacy of modernity is that we feel like representations are the real thing. If I exist in this exact body, in this exact time and space, and you clone me down to the quark, and you put the second version of me right here, they're just occupying a different point in time and space. Like, they have a different angle on how they see the audience right now, which means they might think different thoughts. You can't ever represent me. And the fallacy of modernity is that we are trying to do this and pretend that we can do it. Everybody should read Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. There's this quote, Whitman says, I know that I exist in the best of time and space, and I cannot and never will be measured.
So I was thinking about like revealed versus reported preferences, and thinking about, you mentioned like the AI algorithm is like the wind, and it's this sort of like phenomenal thing that we just sort of experience, but I think there's a lot of intentionality in terms of what that algorithm decides, and sort of the revealed nature is almost too passive. So I think there's some induction in terms of like those algorithms shaping the outcome, which is sort of the incentives that the platform is presented or have in front of you. So I guess, yeah, do you have ideas or thoughts on that?
Could you repeat the beginning? There was a couple words I didn't hear.
So like revealed versus reported preferences.
I see, right. And then, sorry, how is that?
So just to restate it. So I guess you were talking about the difference between people's revealed and reported preferences, and you sort of alluded to the algorithm as this sort of like passive thing like convened. And I guess I think there's a little bit more incentives baked into that algorithm that sort of tie into having the revealed preferences be aligned with the platform's incentives for what those preferences should be or they don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that's for sure. It's not. I'm not saying this is it's not a natural system. That being said, I think probably the platform's incentives do align with the user enjoying on some level, or at least continuing to engage with the content that's being shown there. So I don't think they're, in opposition. That being said, of course, they don't have to be perfectly aligned, and I'm sure that's what you're getting at. I don't disagree though.
I think when you move a piece in chess or the bishop diagonally, let's say, like you move the bishop diagonally, but you also physically moved a piece in the real world outside of this game. And that's sort of an interesting thing about that representation to me, that this is a real part of reality. You've actually shown something to the user, and that is actually shaping some part of how they resonate with that. If we treat everything deeply as real, as something that has a real effect, I think that's a good way to proceed.
Backwards.
So this is a question about, I guess, policy. So from this talk, I have sort of heard like two versions of sort of like a laissez-faire approach, right, and then like a top-down approach, if I'm correct. And I guess like so there's the argument that there's like egosyntonic feelings about slopware, or like the content that we consume, or
Yeah. I think first there's a very difficult balance here with, I do think Section 230 is important, for example, that we should protect that ability to publish, content the way we have. And also, I think you should be careful around what could lead into censorship, right? But also the social media bans that are rolling out are also kind of difficult in that they are creating the digital ID for verification, which just allows more techno capital to be amassed among the surveillance platforms. I think part of the problem here is the framing that these ever were platforms, as in like a flat neutral structure that if you're speaking on it, you get a voice, right? We're on a platform right now, except these are more intermediaries. And I think as long as we recognize that these are intermediaries and we write our legislation so that one, these algorithms are transparent to all, two, uphold existing norms about free speech, which I do think are good, but three, the incentive structure is more aligned with subjective, perhaps, ratings that an individual feels. Like there should be like a question after a video, like, hey, was this good for society or not? Something like that. There are just ways to do this, and I think that we should be very careful about the framing of platforms in the first place and start there.
I just have the question. What platform is the closest to, existing platform is the closest to your vision?
Yeah, maybe I'm just like free to go arrow-pilled Zoomer, but I do think like the early internet with sites that felt like sites, again, if we're experiencing meaning, I think an important thing is a bounded sense of time and place. We need a sense of a ritualistic interaction with something that has definition. If it feels like it is in a single time and place, then we feel meaning toward it in a way we don't feel with liminal streams. I do like a version of the internet more where we go to individual websites and it feels like you're hopping off of the information superhighway rather than just trapped onto it. But I recognize also that these streams of content are the sort of reality, and being a slop pragmatist, I would appreciate any efforts to make our experience online feel more bounded and intentional and have those kind of stopgap measures in place of one, being aware of what's being distributed. Everybody needs to know exactly what the the code is of these algorithms or something. And I guess it doesn't work with AI as much as more. But we need to be aware of exactly how things are. We should have.
Okay, but you kind of dodge the question. Yeah. What existing platform, and acknowledging that the internet is not like how you. I like that era of the internet too. I mean, I've been on the internet since 1994 or something like that. It was very, very different. I have nostalgia for that, but I acknowledge those systems got outcompeted for a reason, and that competition is real, right? So we got X, we got Instagram, we got Blue Sky, we got Nostr, we got Discord, we got Substack. Which of those? Which is the
I do
closest?
like a dark forest kind of style of the internet for the time being. I do like those ways of like going to a cozier part of the web where you can create community, and another big part of humans experiencing meaning is this sense of collective effervescence, like you're actually there with other people, and not the simulation of being there with other people, because that ends up leaving us feeling hollow. The fact that there is no like algorithmic platform that is my ideal version right now does not mean that we cannot attempt to create regulations.
Just one of course is the closest to that compromise you're talking about. Is there one though you can point to? No.
No, I think we should try to build that.
Okay. Lots.
At what point does a Sloptimist start to resemble the crowd on the wrong side of the Emperor's New Clothes story? There's a guy in Princeton. He's written a book called On Bullshit, Harry Frankfurt. At what point is slop, just bullshit? And back in the 1990s, which is when I was a young man, there was this famous so-called affair.
I know about it, yeah.
You just put a bunch of words together and you published it in a refereed journal to essentially expose the case of the Emperor's New Clothes.
Alan Sokal, right?
Alan
linguistics.
Sokal.
Yeah.
So a Sloptimist, to me, is the wrong side of the Emperor's New Clothes, is the idea that Alan Sokal was trying to sort of call out, and it's what Harry Frankfurt calls bullshit, and I'm sitting here saying, well, what kind of universe have I just walked into?
But I feel like, at least I interpret the so-called affair very differently. And I think, he exposed a system that rewarded bullshit and was very institutional and had a lot of intentionality supposedly behind it. And it showed the limits of those types of systems because they were being gatekept by people who were wearing their clothes. I think an algorithm is intrinsically more honest than that. It's just a measurement. Of course, it matters how you measure those
But
things.
the question is if you can ascribe meaning to anything.
Yeah, but I'm not saying you can ascribe meaning to anything.
You're so optimistic.
I am a sloptimist, but I think you also are missing a big part of what I was saying, which was that this is a system that is amortizing the development of AI, which I think will lead to things that are more important objectively than slop, like curing cancer, etc., freeing us of labor and burden, etc. So that's what I'm optimistic for. I'm optimistic that slop is the path towards that, or that because that's the path that we're on, that's what we're stuck with. And I do think that, not necessarily always, but in this case, these are means to an end that are justified because the end could theoretically accomplish a lot of the things that we both agree need to be accomplished.
And academic research is great to accomplish stuff that cures cancer, but I'm worried about academia slop, where there are 13% of papers written with AI, things you have an incentive to just like optimize for your Z-score.
But so-called affair shows you this is not an AI. This is not an AI.
Of course. No. I was just saying that as an example of what the current reality is.
Yeah.
But there's the publisher perish kind of incentive, and people are churning out slop papers merely to publish papers that don't have any kind of depth or value to them. There's all those like paper mills, and I think these are deep problems. And yes, we should focus on curing cancer, but also we should make sure we're doing quality research so we know what we're looking at in the first place.
Yeah. But I think that's a red herring. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think these are not mutually exclusive things.
So you agree with changing the incentive structures for academic paper publishing?
Well, yeah, but I think that's a very, sure. But I think that's there's
right.
another system that has become, out of control in some way and has incentives that are not aligned with its stated goals.
So when incentives are not aligned with stated goals, we want to change the incentives, right?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. And I'm not disagreeing that there can be better or worse algorithms. I've never intended that.
All right.
Of course there can be.
Then we are on the same page.
But I mean, algorithms are constantly changing and evolving, and also trying to optimize for themselves. I mean,
the fact that they're changing and evolving doesn't mean we shouldn't try to like be careful and regulate and be very intentional with what we do.
Yeah, that's up to the people who are designing the algorithms, right?
And the people who create the structures for the people designing the algorithms. Like they're doing it right now for incentives that are maximizing shareholder value rather than whether this is good for humanity. That's a misaligned incentive.
But I think we are okay.
Maybe we're going in circles.
We are a little bit. I agree that Goodhart's law is a real issue.
Yeah.
When a metric becomes a target, it ceases being a good measure. That being said, you still need targets and you still need measures, and you have to account for that. That is a problem and I think this is the same.
Socrates reminds us to always remember that the metrics are fake. Like they're kind of useful to like look at reality and be like, haha, that's funny, and then like.
Sure. Yes, they're instrumentalized. Yeah, you have to use them. And I think if you're trying to advocate for because these are faulty, we shouldn't use them at all, and that's kind of what it seems like. I just don't understand how that's a better alternative.
Oh, I use it. I make videos online. I just do it with
and I'm sure when you have something that doesn't do as well as others, it doesn't. You're doing RL on yourself somewhere, right?
Yeah. I want to make very good videos that also have deep meaning inside of them, and they're not exclusive, but that's part of it.
Sure, we don't disagree there.
Let's do 2 more questions. I saw Orange. Oh, did he leave? Never mind. I was still there. Come back. Orange, we need you. Orange, we'd be glad to hear you. Come back.
I was going to ask if you found any technologies or projects particularly inspiring for counter slop. You already adequately answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, the funny thing about innovation is I went to this news reel launch party in New York City. It was an app meant to combat slop, and it was you scroll just news. Horrifying. I feel like a lot of the problems of technology cannot be solved with more technology, and I'm not necessarily a Luddite here, but I think we should prioritize individuals, how we feel. I feel inspired when I see people connecting around me, sharing, moments of effervescence, offline and online. One of my favorite Instagram accounts is this social media page called 123 Rollin' Bond, and it's a Dutch conveyor belt company, and it's beautiful. It's got like 100,000 followers that are all like very into conveyor belts. I'm contemplating getting a conveyor belt for my own home. And everybody in the comments is so positive to each other. Again, I really think there can be beauty in the weird shit you find on the internet. And I just want more of those beautiful moments to exist. Conveyor belt companies seem good, and racist videos of black men chasing fried chicken seem bad. If only the incentives aligned with more conveyor belts.
Wouldn't you agree that having a sort of approach which is very public discoursey, in which you're talking and you're saying that I don't like this, people should not be liking this, valid method to achieve where you want to be, Adam, where we can sort of not change the rules, but try to force the rules to exist to where we want it to be? Like, an example of this is, Meta listens to everyone complaining about AI slop. So now they have a profit-making incentive to not make AI slop because the people don't want it. Don't you think that is the way forward if we all just like take a stance and talk and display that outcry, and that could like align both the things together and get to the future where we want it to be?
I think that what you're describing is capitalism. It's very good at responding to changes in consumer preferences very quickly. So I don't really think we're in opposition there at all.
It's great to be vocal about not liking AI slop, but again, I don't think AI was ever the issue here. The issue is our attitude toward metrics and the general societal instrumentality we treat things. Something that is optimized to not be AI but still go viral is still slop. Slop exists because the metrics create it, and we are here consuming it, and people are producing it, and we are all kind of beholden to the metrics. Wendell Berry once said, there will come a time when the greatest choice in society is whether men choose to live as creatures or as machines. And I would rather choose to live as a creature that occasionally logs onto a machine.
Epic machine.
Thank you.
That was awesome, Buzzer.